June 10th, 1963, 12:41 a.m., Harlem. One fire took Bumpy Johnson's only daughter. In the next 24 hours, an entire gang vanished without a war, without a chase, without a scream. This wasn't revenge or pride. It was strategy under pressure. One man chose silence over bloodshed, and Harlem survived. So how did Bumpy live through the unthinkable and still win? To understand that night, we have to return to the beginning. 2:17 in the morning, August 14th, 1968. Harlem was pretending to sleep when the screaming started. Not the usual screaming, not the kind from backroom card games or domestic fights. This was the sound of human meat cooking, the sound of lungs trying to pull oxygen from air that had turned into liquid fire. The brownstone on 131st Street between Lenox and 7th did not catch fire. It exploded. Someone had soaked the stairwells in gasoline, painted the walls with kerosene, turned the whole structure into a 4-story funeral pyre waiting for a match. When that match got struck, the building went up like a bomb made of wood and human bodies. Windows blew out in sequence, first floor to third, glass shrapnel raining down, each explosion followed by screams that got higher and shorter until they turned into sounds that did not come from anything human anymore. Tommy Riggs was walking home from his graveyard shift at the meatpacking plant when he saw the flames. He ran toward the building and got close enough to feel his eyebrows start to singe before the heat wall stopped him. "Christ almighty, there are people burning in there," he shouted. "Someone get a ladder, get water, get something." A second-floor window framed a woman in a nightgown that was already smoking and curling at the edges. Her hair was catching fire strand by strand, little orange worms eating across her scalp. She was trying to scream, but the smoke had scorched her throat raw, so what came out was more like wet gurgling, like someone drowning in hot tar. Her name was Elise Johnson. She was 26 years old. She taught 3rd grade at a school on 135th Street. She was Bumpy Johnson's only daughter, and she was about to burn to death while 50 people watched from the street and did absolutely nothing because there was nothing to do except watch and remember. "Jump, baby, jump," a woman in the crowd yelled. "We will catch you. I swear to God, we will catch you." But Elise did not jump. The smoke filled her lungs like wet cement, and she collapsed backward into the flames, her body jerking once, twice, then going still, in a way that made everyone on the street turn away, because watching someone burn alive was the kind of thing that stayed with you forever, the kind of thing you saw when you closed your eyes at night for the rest of your life. By the time the fire trucks arrived, the building was a charred skeleton with nothing inside except ash that used to be furniture and ash that used to be people. The fire chief stood on the sidewalk with soot on his face and told the crowd what everyone already knew. "Professional arson. Accelerant on every floor. Whoever did this wanted everyone inside dead and wanted them to die screaming." Old Man Carter stood in the crowd with his hands shaking and his face the color of spoiled milk. He turned to the young runner standing next to him, a kid named Marcus who worked the numbers on 125th. "You understand what just happened, boy? You understand what kind of door just got kicked open?" Marcus shook his head. He was 22 years old and thought he had seen everything. "Someone torched a building. Happens all the time. Insurance fraud, probably." Carter grabbed Marcus by the front of his shirt hard enough to pop a button. "That was Bumpy Johnson's daughter in there. His only child was burning alive while you and me and 50 other people stood here and watched. You know what Bumpy did to the last man who touched his family?" This was 1955. Some punk kid from the Bronx pistol-whipped Bumpy's nephew outside a pool hall. Bumpy found the kid 3 days later, tied him to a chair in a basement on 142nd Street. Used a claw hammer on every finger, one at a time, starting with the pinkies and working inward. Took his time, made it last 4 hours. The kid was begging to die by the end, literally begging, offering to do anything if Bumpy would just put a bullet in his head and finish it. You know what Bumpy did? He let him go. let him walk out with 10 broken fingers that healed crooked and hands that would never work right again. That kid spent the rest of his short life as a living reminder. He ate soup with a spoon tied to his wrist like a prosthetic, could not button his own pants, could not hold a pen. That was over a beating that did not even put the nephew in the hospital. This is his daughter, burned alive. You understand now? Marcus went pale. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Around them, the crowd was thinning. People walking away fast, heads down, hands in pockets, trying to make themselves invisible before someone decided they had seen too much. In Harlem, there were rules that kept the neighborhood from turning into a free fire zone. You did not touch children. You did not touch women who were not in your life. And you absolutely did not touch family, unless you wanted to start something that would not stop until bodies were stacked in the morgue like cordwood. Those rules existed because everyone understood that without them, Harlem would eat itself alive in about 72 hours. Bumpy Johnson had enforced those rules for 2 decades. Had made examples so brutal they got turned into ghost stories. Parents told their children to keep them from joining gangs. Had taught lessons with blowtorches and piano wire and battery acid that made men wake up screaming 15 years after the fact. The fire on 131st Street was not just murder. It was someone pissing on Bumpy Johnson's throne while he sat in it, someone announcing that the old king was finished, and the crown was up for grabs, and the first move in the new game was turning his daughter into charcoal. By 6 in the morning, every person in Harlem knew. The word spread through barbershops and corner stores and churches. Elise Johnson was dead. Arson. Professional job. Someone had crossed the line that was never supposed to be crossable. And now the only question was how many people were going to die before the account balance. Junie Bird called Bumpy's apartment at 6:15. The phone rang so many times Junie thought maybe Bumpy had already left and was already out hunting. Then the line clicked and Bumpy's voice came through, flat and empty like a recording. "I heard." "What do you need?" Junie asked. "I can have 20 men armed and ready in 30 minutes. Just tell me where to point them." Silence. It stretched so long Junie checked to make sure the line had not gone dead. Then Bumpy spoke again. "Nothing. Not yet." "Nothing?" Junie's voice cracked. "They burned your daughter alive. They used accelerants and turned Elise into ash while half the neighborhood watched. You want me to do nothing?" "I want you to wait." Bumpy's voice did not change pitch or volume. It stayed flat and cold as a mortuary slab. "When I move, everyone involved dies. Not just the man who struck the match. Everyone. The man who bought the gasoline. The man who gave the order. The man who thought about giving the order but decided not to stop it. I want them all gone. But I want it done surgically. I want it done so clean that nobody can prove anything but everyone knows exactly what happened and why. That takes time. How long? 24 hours. The line went dead. Junie stared at the phone like it might explode. 24 hours. In 24 hours, whoever did this could be in another state. But Junie had worked for Bumpy long enough to know that when he said wait, you waited. Because what came after the waiting was always worse than anything you could have done in the moment. At a diner on 145th Street, 3 men sat in a corner booth with cold coffee and warm fear. Curtis, the one with the knife scar across his throat, spoke first. "You heard about the Johnson girl?" Raymond Quick Thompson nodded. "The whole city heard by now. Arson, accelerant, professional job." Curtis lit a cigarette and took a drag that made the cherry glow like a warning light. "You remember Paulie Terranova? 1959. Paulie tried to expand into Bumpy's territory. Bumpy took him to a butcher shop on the 138th, hung him on a meat hook by his collarbone, left him there for 8 hours. The hook went in right here. Quick tapped the spot between his neck and shoulder, and came out here. Paulie screamed until his voice gave out. When Bumpy finally cut him down, Paulie could not lift his right arm for the rest of his life. Every time it rained, the pain came back, That was over territory. Huh, over money. This is his daughter. Quick's jaw tightened. I heard he is just sitting in his apartment, not making calls, not giving orders, just sitting there in the dark. That is the worst possible sign, Curtis said. That means he is not reacting, he is planning. And when Bumpy Johnson plans something, people do not just die. They die in ways that make other people check their locks twice before bed. All over Harlem, the same conversation was happening. Everyone asks the same questions. Who did it? Why? What is Bumpy going to do? And underneath those questions, the real question nobody wanted to voice. How many of us are going to get caught in the blast radius when he finally moves? Bumpy Johnson sat in his apartment on Edgecombe Avenue in complete darkness. All curtains drawn, all lights off. The only sound was his own breathing, slow and measured. On the wall across from him, photographs of Elise covered every inch. Birthday parties, graduations, Christmas mornings. A whole life captured in silver and paper. A whole life that had just ended screaming in a fire that was not an accident. On the table beside him sat an unopened bottle of Barolo 1934. He stared at it, thought about opening it, decided against it. Opening it would mean accepting that she was gone. Would mean beginning the mourning process. And he was not ready to mourn yet. First came the other thing. The thing that would make whoever did this regret not just the act but every decision that led them to think it was acceptable. His hands were folded in his lap, perfectly still. But inside his head, he was already working. Already building the plan that would tear apart not just the people responsible, but the entire structure that allowed them to think burning his daughter alive was a move they could survive. 24 hours. That was all he was giving himself. Then Harlem was going to learn that there are things worse than death, and Bumpy Johnson knew how to deliver every single one of them. 6 hours after the fire, Harlem expected war. Expected to wake up to bodies in alleys with their throats opened ear to ear. Expected to hear gunshots echoing between buildings like fireworks on the 4th of July. Expected to see Bumpy Johnson's crew rolling through the streets in black Cadillacs with Thompson submachine guns hanging out the windows, turning every corner into a free fire zone until whoever burned his daughter was lying face down in a puddle of their own regret. But the war did not come. The guns stayed silent. The streets stayed empty of everything except fear. Bumpy Johnson sat in his apartment on Edgecombe Avenue with every curtain drawn and every light off, sitting in a chair that faced the wall covered with photographs of Elise at every age from infant to adult. On the table beside him, that bottle of Barolo 1934 sat unopened, the seal still intact. The wine aging inside while outside Harlem held its breath and waited for the explosion that refused to come. Nobody came to the apartment. Nobody called. The phone sat on its cradle like a dead thing because everyone who knew Bumpy understood that when a man like him goes silent after losing his daughter to arson, you do not interrupt. You do not offer condolences. You wait. You stay out of the way. You make sure your own affairs are in order, because when he finally moves, the blast radius is going to be wide and the collateral damage is going to be significant. At the barber shop on 129th Street, 3 men sat in chairs waiting for cuts they were not going to get because the barber had not shown up. Leon, who ran numbers for 15 years, spoke first. 6 hours, no retaliation, no response. Nothing. Marcus, sitting 2 chairs down, shook his head slowly. Maybe he is broken. Maybe losing Elise broke something in him that cannot be fixed. The third man, an older runner named Clayton who had been in Harlem since before Bumpy took over, laughed without any humor in it. You think silence means weakness? You think a man like Bumpy Johnson sits quiet because he is broken? Let me tell you what silence means. Silence means he is thinking. Silence means he is planning. Silence means he is deciding who lives and who does not, and how bad it is going to hurt when the hammer finally drops. Clayton leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. You remember Eddie Green? 1962. Eddie thought he could skim from the policy banks. Bumpy found out, did not confront him right away. Waited. Watched. Let Eddie keep skimming for 3 months while Bumpy built a case in his head. Then one night, Bumpy invited Eddie to dinner. Steakhouse on 145th. Expensive place. They ate. They drank. They talked like old friends. Then at the end of the meal, Bumpy reached across the table and took Eddie's right hand. Just held it there on the tablecloth. And then Junie Bird came out of the kitchen with a ball-peen hammer and broke every bone in Eddie's hand right there in front of a full restaurant. 37 bones. They counted after. Eddie never worked again. Could not even tie his own shoes. That is what Bumpy does when he takes his time. Marcus swallowed hard. His throat clicked. So what do? We stay out of the way, Clayton said. We do our jobs. We keep our heads down. And we pray we are not on whatever list he is making right now. At the church on 133rd Street, Father Donnelly was hearing a confession from a man whose voice shook so badly he could barely form words. I knew about the fire before it happened, not the details, not who or when. But I knew someone was planning something big, and I did not say anything. I kept my mouth shut because keeping your mouth shut in Harlem is how you stay breathing. But now that girl is dead and I keep seeing her face in the window, keep hearing her screaming. Father Donnelly's voice came through the screen quietly and steady. Did you know it would be her? Did you know it would be Bumpy Johnson's daughter? No, I swear to God I did not know. But I knew something was coming, and I said nothing. And now Bumpy is going to tear this neighborhood apart looking for everyone who knew and said nothing. Then you need to leave, Father Donnelly said. Tonight. Pack a bag, get on a bus, go to Philadelphia or Baltimore or anywhere that is not here. Because if Bumpy Johnson decides you are part of this, confession will not save you. Prayer will not save you. Nothing will save you. The man on the other side of the screen started crying. I have lived in Harlem my whole life. This is my home. Then make your peace with God, Father Donnelly said, because Bumpy Johnson is about to make you pay for your silence, and payment in Harlem always comes in flesh. At the Policy Bank on Amsterdam Avenue, 3 counters sat around a table with money they were supposed to be processing. Willis, the head counter, kept looking at his watch. 18 hours since the fire. Still nothing. You think he knows? Asked Thomas, the youngest. About the meeting. About who was there. About what got decided. Willis stopped counting and looked up. His face went the color of ash. How do you know about the meeting? Thomas realized his mistake too late. I heard things. People talk. Just that there was a meeting a week ago. That some people decided Bumpy was too old, too set in his ways, that Harlem needed new management. Willis stood up so fast his chair fell over. If Bumpy finds out you knew about that meeting and said nothing, he is going to take you apart piece by piece. He is going to start with your fingers and work his way up to your elbows. He is going to make it last days, and when you are begging him to finish it, he is going to keep you alive just to prove he can. Thomas was sweating now, big drops rolling down his forehead. I did not know they were going to touch his daughter. I swear I did not know. It does not matter what you knew, Willis said. It matters what you should have said. And you should have said something the second you heard about any meeting where people were discussing taking Bumpy Johnson down. Now we are all going to pay for your silence. All over the neighborhood, similar conversations were happening. In corner stores and after-hours clubs and basement apartments where men gathered to play cards and pretend they were not scared. Everyone asks the same questions. Why is he waiting? What is he planning? Who is on the list? And underneath all of it, the growing understanding that the silence was not mercy. The silence was not a weakness. The silence was Bumpy Johnson building something in his head, something comprehensive and surgical, and designed to make sure that when it finally came down, nobody would ever think about crossing him again. The clock kept ticking. The silence kept growing. And underneath it all, Bumpy Johnson sat in the dark and finished building the plan that would burn down not just the people responsible, but the entire system that allowed them to think touching his family was acceptable. 24 hours. That was all Harlem had left before learning that some debts cannot be paid with money or apologies. Some debts get paid in screaming and regret, and lessons carved so deep into flesh that they become permanent reminders of why certain lines should never be crossed. 20 hours after the fire, Bumpy Johnson finally moved. Not with guns, not with explosives, not with the kind of immediate violence that Harlem had been bracing for since they pulled what was left of a lease out of the brownstone on 131st Street. He moved with a phone call. One phone call to Junie Bird at 11 o'clock at night, his voice so calm it made Junie's hands start shaking. "Come to the apartment. Bring Willie. Bring Clayton. Nobody else. No guns, no noise. Just come." Junie arrived 30 minutes later with Willie Gaines and Clayton Moore, the three of them climbing the stairs like they were walking to their own executions. What they found was Bumpy sitting at his kitchen table with the lights on for the first time in 20 hours. A map of Harlem spread out in front of him, and a list of names written in handwriting so precise it looked like it had been typed. Bumpy did not stand when they entered, did not shake hands. "Sit down," he said, and the three men sat in wooden chairs that were hard and uncomfortable, the kind that made you stay alert because relaxing was not an option. The room felt like a church before a funeral, cold despite the August heat outside. The single light bulb hanging from the ceiling cast shadows that made everyone look 10 years older. Bumpy put his finger on the map, right on the block where the fire had happened. "The man who lit the match is named Rafael Torres. He is a torch for hire, works out of the Bronx, gets paid $500 to burn buildings. He is good at what he does. Professional. Clean." Junie leaned forward. "Where is he now?" "Does not matter," Bumpy said. His voice stayed flat. No emotion. Just facts delivered like a coroner reading the cause of death. "Rafael is a tool. You do not punish the hammer for hitting the nail. You punish the hand that swung it." Bumpy slid the list of names across the table. Junie picked it up and read. His face went white. 12 names. 3 policy bank operators, 2 runners, 4 street enforcers, 1 cop, 1 city councilman, and at the top, underlined twice, Vincent the Barber Cicero. A captain in the Genovese family who had been trying to push into Harlem for 5 years. "The Barber ordered the hit?" Junie asked. "The Barber held a meeting 8 days ago," Bumpy said. "Restaurant in the Bronx, private room. 12 people attended. They discussed how Harlem was underutilized, how I was too old and too set in my ways, how the neighborhood needed new leadership. They took a vote. Unanimous, I was out. The Barber was in. They decided that burning my daughter alive would send the right message." Clayton's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ground audibly. "How do you know all this?" "Because one of the 12 people at that meeting has been on my payroll since 1960, Bumpy said. "He called me the morning after the meeting, told me everything, every name, every vote, every word. I told him to keep his mouth shut and wait." Willie looked at the list. "You want us to kill all 12? "No," Bumpy said, and the way he said it made the temperature drop another 10 degrees. "I want you to take apart the system that let them think this was acceptable. Rafael the Torch gets to live because he was hired to do a job and did it. He did not know who was in that building. But the 12 people who attended that meeting, they knew. They voted. They decided that killing my daughter was good business. Those 12 do not get to die quickly." Junie set the list back on the table. "What do you want us to do?" Bumpy tapped the map. The barber gets his money from 4 sources: protection rackets on Amsterdam Avenue, loan sharking on 155th Street, a policy bank on Broadway, and kickbacks from the city councilman. Starting tomorrow morning, all 4 revenue streams dry up. The businesses in Amsterdam stop paying protection. The loan sharks disappear. The policy bank gets raided by cops still on my payroll, and the councilman gets a visit from federal investigators who suddenly have evidence of kickbacks going back 7 years. Clayton whistled low. That is going to take coordination. Going to take a call in every favor we have saved since 1950. Then start calling, Bumpy said. I want the barber to break before he understands what is happening. I want him sitting in his restaurant wondering why his money stopped. I want him making phone calls that do not get answered, and when he is sweating enough, when he is desperate enough, when he is scared enough to make mistakes, that is when we take everything else. What about the others? Willie asked. The cop gets transferred to Staten Island where he cannot hurt us. The runners get their hands broken in places that do not heal right, fingers that will never close into a fist again. The enforcers get visits in the night that leave marks but not bodies, because I want them alive to tell everyone what happens when you vote to burn someone's daughter. Bumpy finally opened the bottle of Barolo that had been sitting untouched for 20 hours. He poured 4 glasses. To Elise, he said, who deserved better than to die screaming in a fire set by men who thought they were too smart to get caught. The 4 men drank. The wine tasted like funeral dirt and unfinished business. Outside, Harlem slept its uneasy sleep. Inside, the plan was set. 24 hours had passed. Now came the part where everyone involved learned that some debts cannot be paid with money or apologies. Some debts get paid in ruin and regret, in watching everything you built collapse while you stand there powerless to stop it. The first business stopped paying on Tuesday morning. A butcher shop on Amsterdam Avenue that had been paying Vincent, the barber Cicero, $300 a week for protection since 1965. The collector showed up at 9 o'clock expecting an envelope and instead got an apology. Sorry, Tony. Cannot do it anymore. Business is slow. Come back next month. Maybe things will be better. Tony was not a negotiator. He was an enforcer. 6'2", 240 pounds, hands like cinder blocks. He grabbed the butcher by the collar and slammed him against the meat locker hard enough to rattle the hinges. You think you can just stop paying? I will burn this place down with you inside it. The butcher did not flinch, did not beg, just looked Tony in the eye and said 4 words that made Tony's grip loosen. Ask Bumpy about fires. Tony left without the envelope. By noon, 2 more businesses in Amsterdam had refused to pay. By 3 o'clock, it was 5. By sunset, every shop between 145th and 155th had stopped paying protection to the barber's crew. And when the collectors tried to get rough, they found themselves facing shop owners who were suddenly very calm, very certain, and very willing to let whatever happened next just happen. At a restaurant in the Bronx, Vincent, the barber Cicero, sat in his usual booth with his lunch going cold because his appetite had disappeared somewhere around the 4th phone call. His lieutenant, a thin man named Paulie with a scar splitting his left eyebrow, sat across from him. It is not just Amsterdam. The loan operation on the 155th is gone. All 12 of our guys did not show up this morning. Their apartments are empty. Their cars are gone. It is like they evaporated. The barber set down his fork. His jaw worked like he was chewing glass. What do you mean evaporated? I went to Mickey's apartment, door unlocked. Everything is still there. Clothes in the closet, food in the fridge. But Mickey is gone. Same with Tommy. Same with all of them. Like they got a phone call and decided to be somewhere else. What about the policy bank on Broadway? Paulie's face went pale. Raided this morning. Cops came in at 6 with a warrant, took all the records, arrested the counters. The whole operation is shut down. Which cops? The same cops who have been taking our money for 3 years. They walked in like they had never seen the place before and took everything. The barber's hand went flat on the table. "Bumpy," he said. Not a question, a realization. "This is Bumpy Johnson. He is not making a move. He is taking the whole board apart, one piece at a time. The businesses stopped paying because he told them to. The loan sharks disappeared because he gave them a choice between leaving and dying. The cops were always his, not ours. We thought we bought them. We were renting. And the lease just expired." Paulie swallowed hard. "What about the councilman?" The barber picked up his phone and dialed. The line rang 6 times. "Councilman Morrison's office." "Put him on." "I am sorry, sir. The councilman is currently meeting with federal investigators regarding allegations of bribery and fraud. He will not be taking calls for the foreseeable future." The line went dead. Barber set the phone down with the kind of precision that suggested he was trying very hard not to throw it through the window. "The councilman is finished. The feds have him, and if they have him, they have records. Everything that ties back to us." "What do we do?" The barber did not answer. He was doing math in his head. 4 revenue streams, all gone in less than 12 hours. No gunshots, no fires, no bodies. Just silence and absence, and the sudden realization that the ground he had been standing on was quicksand that had been slowly pulling him down while he was too busy counting money to notice. In Harlem, the word spread faster than it had after the fire. The barber was bleeding. Not from a knife wound, but from 1,000 small cuts happening all at once. His protection racket was gone. His loan operation had evaporated. His policy bank was seized. His political protection was being interrogated by the FBI. And nobody knew where the next cut was coming from. At the barber shop on 129th Street, Clayton sat watching the street through the window. Leon came in and sat down next to him. "Have you heard about the barber?" Clayton nodded. "The whole neighborhood heard. Bumpy is taking him apart piece by piece." "No bodies yet," Leon said. "No violence, just money disappearing and people vanishing." "It is worse than shooting someone," Clayton said. "When you shoot a man, he dies and it is over. When you do it this way, he watches himself die slowly. Watch his empire collapse, watch his people abandon him, and he cannot fight back because there is nothing to fight. No target to hit, no enemy to kill. Just the slow understanding that he made a mistake that cannot be fixed." Outside, Harlem had changed its rhythm. The streets looked the same, but something fundamental had shifted. The men who used to walk with their heads high were suddenly looking over their shoulders. The enforcers who used to collect protection money were finding excuses to be somewhere else. The whole structure the barber had built over 5 years was coming apart like wet newspaper. At his restaurant, the barber made more calls, tried to reach his contacts in the Genovese family, got answering services and secretaries who said everyone was unavailable, tried his lawyer, got voicemail, tried the backup counters, numbers disconnected. Everyone who had been part of his operation had received the same memo. Stay away. Do not answer. Let him sink alone. By midnight Tuesday, the barber understood what Bumpy Johnson was doing. This was not revenge. This was surgery. Precise, methodical, designed to remove not just the barber, but everyone who thought it was acceptable to cross certain lines. And the worst part was that there was nothing he could do to stop it. No deal he could offer, no territory he could surrender, no apology that would matter. He had crossed a line that should have stayed sacred, and now he was learning that some lines have consequences that cannot be negotiated away. 72 hours after the fire, Vincent the barber Cicero realized he was already dead. Not literally. His heart still beats, his lungs still pulled air, but everything that made him powerful, everything that made him feared, everything that made people answer when he called, had been surgically removed in 3 days. The phone on his desk rang at 9 o'clock. He picked it up expecting bad news. What he got was worse. "Mr. Cicero, this is Detective Walsh, NYPD. We need you to come down to the precinct to answer some questions about your business operations. Voluntary for now, but I would not wait too long if I were you." The barber hung up without responding. Detective Walsh had been on his payroll since 1964, collecting $500 a month to make sure raids never happened. Now Walsh was calling him Mr. Cicero and treating him like a suspect. The message was clear. The cops had flipped. Every badge the barber thought he owned was now working for Bumpy Johnson. By noon Wednesday, 3 more things happened. First, his lawyer called to say he could no longer represent him due to a conflict of interest. Second, his accountant disappeared, and with him went all the financial records. Third, the Genovese family sent a message through an intermediary in a parking garage. 90 seconds. "You are on your own. Whatever you did to make Bumpy Johnson come after you like this, you fix it yourself, or you die by yourself. But you do not bring it back to us. We are done." The barber sat in his restaurant with Paulie and stared at the wall. "How many men do we have left?" Paulie's voice was barely above a whisper. 4 out of 32. The rest either vanished or stopped answering their phones. "What about the 12? The ones who were at the meeting? 2 left the city Tuesday. 3 more are trying to make deals with Bumpy's people, offering information, offering money, offering anything if he will just let them live. The others are hiding or praying or both." The barber stood and walked to the window. A week ago, he controlled protection rackets worth $50,000 a month, had loan operations bringing in another $30,000, had a policy bank generating $20,000 a week, had political connections that made him untouchable. Now he had 4 men, no income, no protection, and the certain knowledge that Bumpy Johnson was not finished yet. In Harlem, the word had already spread about what Bumpy was doing. Not revenge, restoration. He was restoring the old order, the old rules, the old understanding that certain lines existed for a reason, and crossing them had consequences that could not be bought off or negotiated away. The fire that killed Elise Johnson was a statement that the family was fair game. Bumpy was responding with a counter-statement written in the systematic collapse of everyone who thought that statement was acceptable. Thursday morning, the 2 runners who had attended the meeting were found in an alley off 142nd Street. Not dead. Bumpy wanted them alive, but their hands had been worked over with a ball-peen hammer, every finger broken in 3 places, bones shattered so completely that even surgery could not fix them. They were conscious when it happened, awake for every strike. When it was finished, they were left with a message pinned to their shirts in Bumpy's handwriting. "They voted to burn my daughter. These hands helped plan it. Now these hands are finished forever." Friday morning, the city councilman was arrested. Federal charges: bribery, racketeering, conspiracy. The evidence was so complete, so detailed, so damning that his lawyer took one look and told him to start practicing his apology for the judge. The evidence had been gathered over years, had been saved, had been held back like a loaded gun waiting for the right moment to fire, and Bumpy had just pulled the trigger. By Friday afternoon, the barber's 4 remaining men had quit. Just stopped showing up. Disappeared into whatever holes people disappear into when they realize the ship is sinking. The barber sat alone in his restaurant with the lights off and the door locked, staring at his reflection in the window, trying to figure out how 72 hours had turned him from a captain in the Genovese family into a man with no soldiers, no money, no protection, and no future. Saturday morning, Vincent, the barber Cicero, left New York, drove to the airport, bought a one-way ticket to Las Vegas with cash. Did not tell anyone he was leaving. Just disappeared the way his men had disappeared, the way his operation had disappeared, the way his power had disappeared. He landed in Vegas Saturday night and checked into a motel under a fake name, understanding that he was alive only because Bumpy Johnson had decided that killing him would be too easy. Better to let him live. Better to let him wake up every morning knowing he had lost everything because he crossed a line he should have respected. Better to make him a living example of what happens when you decide that family is fair game and old rules do not matter anymore. In Harlem, the message had been received. The 12 people who attended that meeting were gone. Dead, broken, imprisoned, or exiled. The system that supported them had collapsed. The protection they thought they had bought turned out to be rented, and the landlord had just evicted them all at once. And through it all, not a single shot had been fired. Not a single bomb had been planted. Just the slow, systematic dismantling of everyone who thought Bumpy Johnson's rules were suggestions instead of laws. The old order was restored. The family was sacred again. The line that protected children and wives and people not in life was redrawn in a way that nobody would forget for a generation. And Bumpy Johnson sat in his apartment with the photographs of Elise still covering the wall, finally opening that bottle of Barolo and pouring a single glass for the daughter who would never drink with him again. The daughter whose life had been worth more than every empire in Harlem combined. Harlem woke up differently, not louder, not quieter, just different. The streets looked the same. The buildings stood where they always stood. But something fundamental had changed in a way that everyone could feel but nobody needed to explain. The air was cleaner somehow, like a fever had broken during the night, and the neighborhood was breathing normal again for the first time in years. There were no celebrations, no victory parades, no speeches about justice or revenge or setting things right. The businesses on Amsterdam Avenue opened their doors and went back to work without paying protection to anyone. The loan sharks who used to collect on 155th Street were gone, and the people who owed them money understood without being told that those debts had been erased, along with the men who used to collect them. The policy banks that the barber had been trying to take over were running clean again, the counts going to the right people, the tributes flowing to the right hands. The old order restored without a shot being fired. At the barber shop on 129th Street, old man Clayton sat in his usual chair watching the morning foot traffic pass by the window. Leon came in and sat down next to him without asking for a cut. They sat in silence for 5 minutes before Leon finally spoke. "It is over." Clayton nodded once. "It is over. No bodies, no gunfights, no war. Just gone, all of them. The barber, his crew, the politicians, the crooked cops. All gone like they never existed. That is how you know it was done right," Clayton said. "When you handle something with bullets and bombs, people remember the violence. They talk about the shootout. They argue about who was right and who was wrong. But when you do it the way Bumpy did it, surgical and complete, people do not remember the violence. They remember the lesson. They remember that certain lines exist for a reason, and crossing them has consequences that cannot be negotiated away." Marcus, the young runner, was sitting 3 chairs down, listening. "What happens now? Does Bumpy take over the barber's territory? Does he expand? Does he start a war with the Italians?" Clayton turned and looked at him with the kind of patience you show a child who asks why the sky is blue. Bumpy does not want the barber's territory. He never wanted it. This was not about expansion. This was about restoration. The barber and his crew thought they could rewrite the rules, thought they could make family fair game, thought they could burn Bumpy's daughter alive and face nothing worse than a turf war they might win if they had enough guns and enough money. Bumpy showed them they were wrong, showed them that some rules are not negotiable, showed them that touching family means you lose everything, not just your life, but your operation, your protection, your allies, your future. That lesson is worth more than any territory. Outside, Harlem kept moving. People went to work. Children played on stoops. Old women sat on benches and watched the neighborhood breathe. And somewhere in all of it, buried in conversations that happened in barbershops and corner stores and church basements, the story was being written. The story of what happened when Vincent, the barber Cicero, crossed a line that should have stayed sacred. The story of how Bumpy Johnson responded not with rage, but with precision. Not with immediate violence, but with systematic collapse. Not with revenge, but with restoration of an order that kept Harlem from eating itself alive. The story would be told for decades, would be passed down from fathers to sons, from old-timers to young runners, from one generation to the next. And every time it got told, the lesson stayed the same. Real power does not come from how loud you scream, or how fast you pull a trigger, or how much territory you control. Real power comes from understanding systems, from knowing which threads to pull to make the whole structure collapse, from having the discipline to wait and plan and execute with surgical precision instead of emotional reaction. The fire that killed Elise Johnson was personal. But the response was not. The response was historical. The response was a message written in the collapse of everyone who thought the old rules were optional. A message that would echo through Harlem for generations. A message that said family is sacred, and the man who forgets that will lose everything he ever built and die knowing he brought it on himself. This story is shared for historical insight and personal reflection, not to promote violence or illegal behavior. Thank you for watching until the end. These stories take weeks of research and writing to create. If this resonated with you, if you see the lesson Bumpy Johnson was teaching about accountability and education over violence, hit that subscribe button. Help us reach 1 million subscribers so we can keep telling stories that matter. Stories about power used wisely. Stories about consequences faced honestly. Stories about men who chose to change systems instead of just destroying enemies. The next video drops soon. Until then, remember, real power is not what you can destroy. It is what you choose to build.